this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I thought I'd get on with this earlier in the day while we got a nice drop of sunshine which sort of brightens the place up, no end. I must admit, on these dull, damp, dreary days, a lot of the time I don't even bother coming out here. It's depressing. But today we got some blue sky, which you might be able to see out through the glass. Right, before we start on the subject for today's chat, some plants that people have asked about. Somebody said, could they have a closer look at the bulbophyllum? That probably means getting my hands dirty, but so be it. Ugh. And I think the reason for asking to see this a bit closer was the plant rather than the actual blooms. But we haven't seen the blooms for a very long time. I've still got new growths on here coming and maturing. But we do have what is actually several plants in the same bowl. Most of which have managed to stay inside the bowl so far. There are some starting to escape over the edge, but this hasn't bloomed for some time. Nice to have 3 blooms out together, even though they're all not as good as each other. The best one is this one up here. You know, it's got the most number of florets, individual flowers, and then the other's not quite so good, but yeah, pleased with it. It's come on nicely since it went in that bowl. It's turned into a nice looking mature plant now. Complete with green bowl. Dip my hands in the water. My jeans are dirty anyway, so that'll do as a towel. Awful. They're due for a wash, so I don't really care if they get grubby at the moment. Right, that was that one. Somebody asked if my Genmanii buds have shown yet, or are they still tucked in the sheath? Can I get at it? Yes. I did move some plants around yesterday. Because we're into the real sort of resting period for the Dendrobiums now, I've rearranged the plants that are resting in the true sense to a place where I don't need to get at them. So they're not in prominent places. However, that's the Genmanii, and we've got 2 buds pushing out the top of the sheath. There will only be 2. They've come out as a pair. I think I had 2 last time. I may have had 3, I'm not sure. So it's coming on. The back end of the plant was taken off because all the leaves went yellow and it wasn't looking very good. And it's just coming into root growth. Yeah. So the bulb's mature, the buds are forming, now it decides to grow some roots. Some of these Cattleyas do produce their roots at odd times, they really do. But the roots on the latest growth are coming out now, and I've said this before, when the relative elements of the plant decide it's root time, there's clusters of those various things in the base of the plant that start the root growth, and it kicks off roots in other places, in older parts as well. So yeah, so we've got some older roots that are actually starting to branch, even right over here. So once it sort of kicks off the new root growth, it seems that whatever hormones or whatever are in the plant start kicking off more roots in other places. So you get a little influx of root growth, which is worth knowing and worth noting in your notes, the time relative to the plant's growth when that actually happens, because it will help you with repotting planning. Root disturbance, well, it's part of the subject in a minute, but root disturbance can set a plant back quite badly, and on some Cattleyas, especially the bifoliates, really badly. They seem more prone to objecting to root disturbance than the single leaf type. Anyway, what was that one? What else? In my I hope you enjoyed all the videos for the Global Virtual Black Friday Orchid Show 2020. There's a mouthful. Yeah, good lot of people joined in. I think I've watched them all now. The search worked okay, you know, given the code, so that worked okay. Yeah, some interesting stuff. I did mine as a bit arty-farty. Do you know, I never had one, it took me ages. There were parts of the music where the music sort of had abrupt sort of staccato beats, boom, boom, boom. And I actually got blooms to go in time with the music. That took me absolutely ages to get that right. Not one comment even mentioned it. I had fun doing it, so not fussed whether anybody else. It's even saw the point, but I had fun doing it. And I used it as a revision as to what bits of the software are there should I want them, on the grounds that most of the bits of the software that are in there I don't ever touch. You know, I use about 5% of that software on a regular basis. It's like now, this video will have no editing. It'll just be clips on the camera. I download them, load them into the software, put a title on and save it. You know, I really don't mess about with my videos. Right, more plants that were asked about. What I was getting to was, in amongst my plants that I showed was what is now Oncidium alexandriae, but was originally called Odontoglossum crispum. Very, very famous orchid, historically speaking, as far as generating the orchid craze in Victoria times. That was the one. Yeah, it was brought back to this country in the thousands to be killed in hothouses. Nobody twigged they were cool growers. Duh. It took quite a long time and a lot of deaths. But I have got one, and somebody said, when was it in bloom? Did I miss the video? Well, yeah, you missed the video a long time ago. I got two Odontoglossums when I went to McBean's nursery. That visit was in March 2016. And because I lost my records, I don't know when my crispum bloomed. But I found out there's a trick that I'd just forgotten even exists. My camera, my DSLR, records all the details of the photo. When it was taken, the exposure, the speed, the camera, the lens, all of that is recorded in the background of the photo. So I went into the folder where I keep my stills, that I use for pop-ups, and got up the details, and the photo was taken on the 16th of April 2018. So it was in bloom on that date. Basically, from memory, I hadn't repotted it since I got it. The spike started, I let it bloom, and it should have been repotted sometime before. Waited till the blooms had finished, took it out of its pot and the roots had gone. And it's been a rescue ever since. It's one of those where in the days when I used to think, oh, we'll let it finish blooming before we repot. We don't do things like that anymore. If it needs a repot, it gets it. Blooms or not. But it lives down here. It's still alive. I still have it. It's not looking very elegant, but that is it, Odontoglossum crispum. It's currently pushing up a new growth, which will, yeah, it's just starting to push some roots out. It's got a lousy root system. It's not held on to a root system for some time. It's been relatively recently repotted, so it can stay in this pot for some time. I don't know whether there's any roots showing down in the pot yet. I doubt it. There's a few down here. No. But its problem is a lousy root system, basically. I'm hoping this new growth will put some roots down into the pot, which should be followed by another new growth, quite honestly. Well, that's the oldest bulb that I've got that's discoloured. So it's struggling. It's been struggling a very long time, but it still exists. You can pay a lot of money for an Odontoglossum crispum if it's the genuine article, because there's lots of masqueraders around that are not a pure crispum. This came from McBean's that have original plants, as in collected from source in the wild. So they have those sources. Over the years they will have produced seed, produced hundreds of seedlings. I mean, when I was there, the current range of seedlings that they just produced from a single plant was 700 potted plants, all from this one, breeding. And he said It's as near as we can get you at the moment to a pure Odontoglossum crispum, but it isn't really, because what it is several seedlings ago we had a bit of a variety came out, and some of them had a bit more pink on them, and some had a few more red dots, and some of them were a bit more frilly, and we selected certain ones and crossed them again to emphasize those nice traits. And what's happened is we took one of the results from that and crossed it back with an original. So that's what you've got. And he said they've all bloomed once and they're a bit of a variety. Some of them look almost identical to the true article. Quite a few of them look exactly the same, but they're a bit bigger. The blooms are a bit bigger, which is acceptable. And he said a few have got the extra pink on them. That's come through in some of them. But because they're not in bloom at the moment, we don't know which ones are which. It's pot luck. So I took one. Mine hasn't got much pink on it. And the other one I got at the same time, I'll put a pop up because, again, it's a rescue. It's struggled over the years. But it's coming on a bit now. And that's not got very good roots again, but it has a good strong new growth coming now. And this one's got a bit more back up here because it's actually got two bulbs behind it plus the leafless one that don't count. But it's not totally shriveled. So this new growth is its hope, and that's Golden Rialto. Lovely blooms on that. So those are the two I got at McBean's. If you search, you need to get onto my homepage to do this sort of thing. You get onto the homepage, and you've got the row of banner headings, one of which is videos. Click on videos, and it just puts up loads of videos, which are my videos, and they're in effectively date order, but there's a little magnifying glass on the end of the line. If you click on that, you can search my videos, and if you put in McBean's, that's M-C-B-E-A-N, you'll find it'll take you straight to anything that's got McBean's in the title, and it'll take you to, I think I did two videos, one looking round the grow areas, because that had to be a tour, you're not allowed in there on your own. Some incredibly valuable stuff in there. So you have a tour. Somebody can keep their eye on you, make sure you're not putting stuff in your pockets and things. But the guy was quite happy for me to film as long as he wasn't in it. So there's that video. I did also a video, they had a display area, loads and loads of cymbidiums and things like that. So I think there's two videos there. But they are findable using that search from the home page on the video tab. Right, that was those. Somebody said, is that Mazda Valuer of yours opened yet? And this will lead us on into the subject matter. And no, it hasn't fully opened, but yes, it nearly has. It's still got to flip the tails open. But this is the one that's basically shades of cream and yellows with hints of orange. It's a lovely bloom on that one. This little piece here, you saw the repot, had no roots, and I don't think it's going to make it because it won't stay in the media. Right, and that leads us on to the subject for today, playing around with different types of media to see how your roots do, and coming to completely invalid sets of results because they're not being thought through. Why not? Right. Let's say I was going to do a proper experiment on media. Let's start with how you would go about it. Let's say we'll have, well, it depends how many different types of medias you've got, but you could have different blends. You know, you could have a small bark with a small amount of charcoal. Or what about small bark with quite a lot of charcoal? That's now a different mix, isn't it? It is a different mix, even though it's the same two components. And then you might add some perlite. That's another one again. So how many different types of media are you going to choose? Are they different enough to bother with? Now you need some plants. They all need to be the same, or it won't work. Now try and find 10 Masdevallias of the same species or hybrid that are the same. What do I mean by the same? Exactly the same number of growths, exactly the same number of roots, at exactly the same stage. So these are either new roots just growing, an established root system, or some of each. Are there any new growths? Some might not have any new growths. Some may have several new growths just starting. So they're not the same, are they? And if they're not the same, I can guarantee you will not get the same results. So these little tests are hit and miss, quite honestly. Let's take, for example, your two Masdevallias again, and the root systems look very good on both plants, and the number of growths look roughly the same. That's not bad. That's not a bad starting point. But would you notice the difference between one of the plants has a mature root system and no new ones, and the other one has some mature root systems, but some of them are quite new, you know, not very long with their growing tips? Would you notice the difference? Which one do you think is going to do better, regardless of which media it goes into? Yeah, we're getting there now. Now let's have a look at choosing totally unsuitable media, like giant bark for a Restrepia. It's probably not going to work, is it? It's a very fine root system on a plant that needs to stay moist all the time. Yeah? So playing around with different types of media for a Restrepia, you're not going to achieve a huge amount, because all you need is a media that has not broken down, is still fresh, is quite tight, so it doesn't need huge amounts of air, so small, compact, small bark with some moss. Possibly moss on its own, although I've gone off that. That doesn't mean to say it doesn't work, don't get me wrong. I mean, I know a good Masdevallia grower grows all of his Masdevallias in nothing but moss. There's nothing else in there. I think he throws some perlite in now and again if he remembers. And they do great and they win prizes, you know, so it can be good. I think there must be a better quality moss around than the stuff I've got. But yeah, so these little tests you do for media, I could understand that you've got, say, 3 plants very, very similar that require to stay moist. That is their basic growing conditions. They need to stay moist and mustn't dry out totally. So we're talking, you know, the cooler, shadier types in my case, say Masdevallias, Draculas, that do need some air, yeah, but, you know, not real open, you know, see-through media. See the gaps right through the pot. And the main thing is it needs to stay moist. So what choices have you got? Perlite on its own, the small perlite holds a lot of moisture and doesn't leave a huge amount of air, but there is some. Charcoal on its own, I'm not so sure about that, the sort of charcoal I've got. The chunky stuff we're putting in open baskets for, you know, large rooted plants, Cattleyas and the like, that need a fast wet dry cycle. It might be brilliant. You've got lava rock. The same applies. It's normally too big and too airy for the likes of the Masdevallias and things like that. You've got the different grades of bark, large, medium, small, and in some cases seedling, which is tiny, you know. And then you've got the coconut husk, you've got the coconut fibre, different thing altogether. Yeah, there is some of the fibre, it mixed in with the cocoa husk normally, but it's a bag full of just that, the fibrous stuff, and I've seen people use that. And the volume that you have to use to be able to squash it round like that and get it in a pot in a suitable form, it's like a bag full for one plant. I saw a video, I was just amazed at the physical amount that it took to actually fill a pot, because it's so, you know, it's like a bag full of hair really. So there are all these different types of medias, but I would think a reasonable test for a Masdevallia would be, say small bark with some charcoal. I like the idea of adding a bit of charcoal in, but not necessary. I just like the idea. So that would be one. Coconut husk, possibly with some charcoal, small pieces, and then perhaps small bark and moss, chopped up moss with some charcoal. So that would be 3 media that most people would say are acceptable for Masdevallias. But then trying to find 3 plants that really are exactly the same is the impossibility. That's the bit where these little tests fall down. Because, you know, it may be that one of those Masdevallias had quite a few quite new roots forming, you know, half an inch to an inch long, along with a reasonably established root system. It could be a Masdevallia that hates root disturbance. That one's going to pull on reasonably well. It may lose a lot of its old roots, but the new ones are growing to replace them. And that one goes in a certain media and does well. And you come to the wrong conclusion because you assume it was the media that did it, when in fact it was nothing more than the plant was in the right state. And then another plant looks the same, but all of the roots are mature and it objects to root disturbance. And say that went in the coconut husk and the roots don't do so well and a lot die. You blame the media. So you see what I'm getting at? These little tests that you can do, and I've done them myself, they are logical when you say them out, but when you dig in, they're difficult to actually make valid. And it's often not the media that the plant went in, it was the plant itself that did well, if you see what I mean. It was just at that right stage to grab a hold and push on. So you need to take care when you're assessing different types of media. The one thing I can almost guarantee is that virtually everything that I have mounted has been successful, including things that were mounted that didn't have very good root systems and had to wait some time to get those root systems. But the roots they had, although not very good, did them okay for long enough to wait for the new roots. That would be bad planning on my part. Planting them like that would be doing it at the wrong time, because if I'd waited for the new roots, they'd have really grabbed hold quick, early, and took off. So we need to go steady when we're thinking about these things. I mean, this one here is a black hair type, and I decided I'd mount this one. It looked like it was going to be quite a compact plant, looking at the canes it already had, and it had this new growth. Well, that's nearly double the size of the old ones, and that may be nowhere near as big as it can get yet, because it is still growing. It's still pushing out new leaves. It hasn't finished. It's going to get bigger. It's got this one that's nearly full size, but it's still got that tinge of paler green to it, so we know it's a new one. It's got this one that's come out after that, which is pushing on. Then it's got this one here, and down inside that one is the next one. So that's got another 3 leaves on it to reach this size, maturity, and the extension of the cane, the node in between them. So it's going to get that much longer. So it hasn't finished growing by any means. But this had some reasonable roots on it. Not brilliant. But it did have the new growth, and it had some signs of some new ones. Now those new ones took off and they've grabbed hold. This plant is now firmly attached. I could take the fishing line off completely. These roots here are attached, as are these down here and these. Some of them are still on the moss. They're still growing. These have still got root tips. So black hair type, no rest in the winter. But it's slowing down. The rate of growth on this new growth is not as fast now because it's got cooler nights, so it's not happy. It's not going to keel over or anything, but it's not in its comfort zone. So it's slowed up. And the fact that it's slowed up, it doesn't get watered quite as often. But it does actually dry in between watering that one, but not for long. Most of the time now I'm going 3 days between watering my mounts. In amongst those are this big, you can't see it because of where I've got the camera today, the big twinkle here. On the last watering session, that one got missed out because it's still quite damp. That's in 3 days. Yeah, so they don't always come round. And then I've got the resting ones. Those got a drop of water yesterday. And that's the first water they've seen since the 16th. So whatever that is, quite a few days. 10 days? 10, 11 days since they had a trickle. But the ones who are not happy with my watering regime are things like this. letting that go 3 days is not good. That should get some water every single day. I mean, this is growing new roots now. I've been watching these little ones in the basket because I want them mounted, but I'm not doing them at this time of year unless they're actively growing. Well, that one's ready. This new growth here is starting its new growth, so that one can go on a mount. I don't know what the others are up to. This little one here. Some of them are so deep down in the pot. Now that one's new growth here that's got roots on it already, so that must have pushed its roots out early. So it's not really growing roots at the moment. This one probably is because it's a big plant. Yeah. This has effectively got a strong new growth that's maturing. That's going to bloom soon, I suspect. And then it's got another new growth here, and it's got one coming out the bottom. But this has got some active root tips, so that one can be mounted. That one's ready to go. And then the last one is a tiny one. Oh, for goodness sake, shut that dog up. Just put it in a bucket or something. Yes, this one's got new roots showing as well, so this one can go. So that's 3 out of 4, and I would take the risk with the 4th one and mount it anyway. I've not had a Tolumnia's roots fail on me yet when it's gone on a mount. I did have a couple fail when they got taken off their mount because the scale had got right in behind the mount and the plants were failing, and 2 of those actually objected to being torn off the mount. It didn't leave enough roots for the size of the plant, plus the scale. Yeah, so that didn't do so good. So yes, my watering now, I can get 2 whole days sometimes where nothing needs doing out here, absolutely nothing. And I'm filling in those nothing days by keeping my eye on stuff that perhaps just I ought to get on and repot or mount. I've got one up here that I'm closely watching because of what it's in. This is a relatively recent one. This was one of the Schwerter ones that I chose. And its latest growth with its sheath has still got no new roots. It's in tight moss. Compact moss. I might be able to lift it out. Yeah, it's in moss with those polystyrene things. Most of those roots are either dead or would be if they got changed into bark. So I know at the moment that is highly likely to dump its old root system. So I can't do anything with it until I've got some new roots growing. It's too big a risk, even though I hate leaving it in that moss this time of year when it's cooler. So that gets watered, the tiniest amount of water, just to keep that damp, never wet. And I don't like it, but I'm stuck with it. That's how it arrived. And it's going to be one of those that may even have to wait for the next new growth before the roots come. But it can sit there and wait. I'm not risking that one. But, yeah, there's a few of the holy clay pots that need their media refreshed. They've been in there a long time now. And some of them didn't get the largest grade bark. Some of them had medium bark, and that's going to break down quicker. So there's some of the holy clay pots. The plants are going to have to come out and have their bark refreshed. And now that we've got that nice new bark that you saw in the video with the new media, I'm quite looking forward to doing those. But again, I've got to wait till those new roots are growing, because to rip one out of a holy clay pot, it's going to tear roots off of the clay. So there's going to be damage. It's impossible not to have any. So the timing is important. I don't worry that there's going to be damage. It's been done before and it works okay as long as there's a good flush of new roots on the go. And then the old ones don't matter so much. Don't forget these pseudo bulbs. They've got their own built-in storage resources that will last the plant some time with no roots at all. So as long as there's new roots growing, it will sort itself out. There was another plant somebody asked about. No, it's gone. Perhaps I should write stuff down. Oh, somebody said, has the Dracula Bella shown any response to going in the cocoa husk? Well, I would say it's a bit too soon. But what it hasn't done is wilt. All the leaves are nice and upright. They've stayed as green as they were, and It's just a matter of it getting some new roots going. The cluster of new roots that were buried down in there are growing, so they haven't stalled. So it is producing some new roots. So it's okay. I wouldn't say it's bursting with energy, but it's okay. Right, just put that back where it goes. And somebody asked about, it's this one. I can't remember why they asked about it, but it's been recently potted up in a holy clay pot. I think it was, oh, I know what it was. I took the risk and repotted it and divided it when there were no sign of any new roots, because I predicted it was going to come into growth. I'm not going to be able to tip this up, but what we've got is a piece here. Yeah. Now that's just got a new root starting and another new root starting. I thought, actually that top one's a new growth. So that's got a new growth with a new root coming underneath it. So this one will now grow on. That will be fine. Yeah. The other piece, which is this piece over here, has still got no sign of new roots, but it has got a nice strong new growth pushing up in there. You should be able to see that somewhere. Let's get the tag out of the way and get the light on it. Anyway, it's got a nice new growth. And given on the other piece that the new growth has started some roots too, I suspect, although we can't see them, that the front end of this plant is also, that piece is also starting its embryo root system. So it was a risk. I think I'm going to get away with it, and I'm going to end up with 2 new growths, which in theory could lead to 2 blooms. This was a division, and it's bloomed everywhere in the past, so it should be okay. That was the Laelia purpurata variety striata. It's my second purpurata. Having got the first one eventually to bloom, I thought, right, we're on a roll now. And the Atropurpurea and the striata, I did practically a whole day on the internet trying to find every single named variety of Laelia purpurata with pictures, verified pictures, not somebody's made up name. And there are a lot of named varieties of purpurata. And out of those, I chose 2 that I liked the most and wrote them down. And I thought, doesn't matter how long it takes, if ever I come across either of those 2, I will get them. Well, I got the first one, the Atropurpurea, from Equigenera at Malvern, and it wasn't a bad plant for once off of them. So the trouble is, I'm sure they've got wonderful plants in Ecuador, but by the time you get them in Malvern in the UK, they've been in the country, well, they've been in Germany since April probably when they bring them. They have a mass import. So they've had to travel from Ecuador to Germany, then they have to live in a separate place. They're bare rooted, and they're just wrapped up in something like newspaper and put in a polythene bag. And by the time it gets to June, and in that particular year it was a heat wave, the plants are not in the best nick. So although I'm sure it's a wonderful place to buy plants from if you can get them quickly, direct, and still in their media, then they're wonderful. But having all of them have to come bare rooted because of the regulations and stuff. But we probably won't see them again in the UK because it'll be too expensive to get the plants across the channel, which is a shame. So a lot of these European sellers, I was just going to say something really stupid then. I took the breath even. I was going to say, you know, if you want the plants from the European sellers now, you'll have to go to a European show. You still got to get back across the water, haven't you? Duh. So you're still subject to the regulations unless you can sneak them in a suitcase or something, but I wouldn't. I personally wouldn't risk it because if you get caught, they confiscate the lot, and you could get a heavy fine as well. So it's just not worth it. Although I know some people that have managed it, shall we say. The other thing is an ask, and I'm not asking for a freebie, even though last time it was a freebie. That sponge rock that I use, I haven't got a huge amount left, and I cannot get that. When I said, well, some considerable time ago, that I couldn't get it, somebody sent me a couple of bags from the States as a gift. Now, I would be quite happy to pay for some of that, including the shipping, providing it's not extortionate, if somebody can get hold of the flipping stuff for me. So there you go. Leave a comment. We'll do a deal of some sort. But yeah, it's something that I've sort of started using now. And even if I don't use it often, I wouldn't want to be without it. And the largest grade I can get in this country is not what I want. It's tiny. I don't think it would serve the purpose that I want from it because it's too small. It wouldn't do the job I want it to do. So if I can't get the big stuff, then I'll stop using it, obviously, if I run out. So I'm looking at one of these plants. When we went round all the twinkles and the little competition to see which one was going to open first, and included the Tahitian dancer, I keep my eye on them because one of them's going to burst on, you know, in one of those times when I don't come out here during the day. I can go a whole day without even opening the door sometimes, so we shall see. But there's none of them are there yet. There's 2 or 3 very close though, so we shall see. So yeah, this business of trying different media, you need to go very careful how you use the results, because the results may not be what you think they are. You might have a plant that's done really well in a certain media, and it's because it's nothing more than the fact it was bang on the right time, it was a reasonable plant in the first place, and it just took off. Some plants just do that on a repot, they just take off, and others stall and sulk. And that could be 2 of the same plants depending on where the state of the new growths are and where the state of the root system is at the time of the repot. So sometimes the conclusions you may jump to may actually be false. They're not based on the right information. So take care making judgments. I mean, I know somebody that, this is a long time ago now, when a person had used the cocoa husk on a set of plants and they rocketed, and that information came back in with samples to an orchid society, and loads of people went out and bought it. And one guy didn't have a large collection and he repotted everything thinking my collection's going to be absolutely wonderful, and killed the lot. Killed every single plant, just didn't get the salt out, and it was a real salty batch. And they were sensitive orchids that don't like salts in the pot. So he wiped out his couple of dozen plants just by changing the media based on what somebody else had said, and probably didn't pass on that information. Oh, by the way, you'll need to flush it 3 or 4 times. Well, if you don't tell somebody that, they might not know. And this is going back to when the internet was not really being used for orchid information. And some of the information you got in those days was just wrong. People were making stuff up. I'm sure they still do in some cases. But you've got too many comparisons nowadays. You need to take care what you say, and make sure what you say is based on something pretty sound, like your own experience, and then tell people about how that experience is and what your environment is, because that will change the goalposts. So you've got to stay on top of it. And if you make stuff up, you'll get caught out nowadays because there's so much cross-referencing information out there. But in the early days, there wasn't. In the early days, you might get a new plant in that's not a rarity, and there wouldn't have been any information on the internet. Perhaps a couple of old documents that somebody had scanned in, but you probably wouldn't find any videos anyway. I mean, we're lucky now. We are very lucky. Got the best of everything, quite honestly. Right, that'll do for today. And as I say, take care. If we don't try different media, then we won't know. But go steady making judgments on your results, and make sure you've analysed it thoroughly beforehand, because you might have just been lucky with that one plant that you caught it at the right time. And then you made the judgment that, oh, this stuff's absolutely brilliant, and you put 2 dozen plants in it and only 1 or 2 do okay. You think, well, that one, so go steady making the judgments. There are guidelines in as much if there are lots and lots of people that use a certain media for certain types of plants and you can see the video evidence that it's working well, you're on a winner, aren't you? If you go down that road. If you head off into the bushes, you might come a cropper. But if somebody doesn't head off into the bushes, we'll never know, will we? I mean, there's an expression, follow the path. And I've always said, follow the path? You must be joking. I'm going to kick my way through the bushes and make my own path. You can follow me. But beware making a new path that nobody's tried before. If we didn't try new things, if you go back far enough, practically everybody grew their orchids on Osmunda tree fern. To the point where the plant was almost extinct. It was all chopped up and orchids growing out of it all over the place. Well, if we hadn't tried new stuff and we were still insisting on using that, we wouldn't have any because it would be gone by now. It would be so rare you'd be paying hundreds of pounds for for one plant. So things change, new things are tried. I mean, one of the nicest ones I saw, because it was decorative, was somebody had got a wooden plaque, so just a flat piece of wood, it didn't matter what it was, and they'd cut wine corks lengthways. Yeah, so they were like half a cylinder, if you see what I mean, not slices, just one slice down the middle, and then they'd stuck them on the board. And they still had the writing on, with the different wine and different sort of chateaus and things like that. And it was decorative on its own, even if it didn't have a plant on it. And the plant did really well. Because strictly speaking, that wasn't really any different from putting it on cork bark. It had ridges, it had dips, yeah. So, somebody thought, well, if all these corks I'm chucking away, how can we use them? So somebody tried that. But there are certain types of wood and even types of bark that really won't do your plants any good because they've got toxins in them. You start pouring water on them, you draw those toxins out and kill your roots. So some wood and bark is toxic. So you need to go, again, you head off in the bushes and start collecting bits of timber and bits of bark in the forest and stuff. You could pick up some duff stuff. You might also pick up all sorts of fungi and spores and all sorts of stuff collecting wood in the forest, but that can be sterilised, that can be dealt with. But again, if you head off into the unknown, you can come a cropper. If you stick with what is tried and tested, it's safer. I won't say it's safe because a plant can still let you down. You can still get what seemed to be a perfectly healthy plant and you repot the flipping thing and it just keels over, and you automatically blame yourself, don't you? Sometimes it's just the plant. And it was borderline going down anyway, and the root disturbance just kicked it over the edge. That can happen. So, anyway, I shall get this one. Blimey, this one will be posted earlier in the day than normal. My bread's cooking. Yay. And I will see you next time. Anyway. I don't know why I'm saying thanks to everybody who joined in with that Black Friday Orchid show, but it was entertainment for me, the fact that everybody joined in. I went through every single one I could find. I may have missed the odd one, but I doubt it. And I watched them and stuck a like on. I wasn't prepared to go through and put a comment on all of them because it would have taken too long. But I watched them all, So yeah, it was a good idea. I think. The last one we had was William Green, I think, Mine Green Pets. He started one of those off. But there was also one done a very long time ago. I think Zane. Can't remember what his channel was called. He doesn't post anymore. He stopped posting quite a while ago. But he did a very entertaining one. He had orchids dancing to music. So the actual whole plant was rotating in time to the music and popping up and down. It was a very, very clever piece of video editing. Very good. But that was some considerable time ago. So these ideas come round. It's like the orchid tag. That comes round every now and again. The problem, in the first round of the orchid tag, it worked well. And it went on for a nice long time. The reason, there weren't as many channels. Now the problem is nowadays, you can't be subscribed to all of the channels. So the tag falls flat on its face often quite quickly. So let's say somebody starts the tag and they tag me. Then the idea is I do the tag and then I tag 2 more people. They would be people I've subscribed to, so that I know them, yeah? But one of those could tag somebody that I'm not subscribed to, so I won't even know that tag's happened, and they might not know it's happened, and it stops. As soon as one of the lines is not actioned, which is followed by another 2, that line stops dead. So where there were 2, there's now only 1. And it doesn't take much for that stop point to happen again when there are so many channels. And let's face it, not all the channels can be big ones. Some of the smaller ones often stay small. Some of them stop posting. Some of them will climb up slowly but surely and one day become huge, you know. But there's all these different channels out there, and a tag can fall flat on its face relatively quickly, depending on who is chosen and whether that person is actively notified. And sometimes that's not as easy as it sounds. Not everybody publishes their email as part of their channel. So how do you give somebody a prod and actually say, oi, you've been tagged? If they don't watch your video where you tag them, it stops. So you can see how the tag fails. In more recent times, it hasn't done anywhere near as well as it used to when it first came out. I think when it first came out, I think it was Rachel that tagged me. And I was honoured to be even considered, you know, in those days. Anyway, it was all good fun. And I remember that video's been deleted because I don't know whether I was ill or something, but this was in the days when I had comfy chairs out here and nowhere near as many orchids. And I sat down here. It was the first time I'd ever pointed a camera at myself. And I remembered my daughter saying, "Dad, you look absolutely awful in that video. Have you looked at it?" And I looked at it and I thought, yeah, I do. I took the video down in the end. I felt so bad about it. Now I don't care. You know, I am what I am. You like it or lump it. Please yourselves. Like I say, we are what we are. I'm not putting wall paint on. So we'll stay as we are. Anyway, thanks for dropping by. If you are watching and you haven't subscribed, it would be nice if you did so. I'm not a pushy sort for that sort of thing. It's also nice to hit that like, you know. If you've got this far, you've spent time with me watching the video. Hit the like, or if you must, the dislike, whatever. I can't imagine somebody getting this far into one of my videos and then disliking it. They'd have bailed out yonks ago. So anyway, it's nice to get those subscription numbers going up, and it's nice to have the likes. They all contribute to the way YouTube views the channel. And how YouTube views the channel is how it progresses. Yeah? If they see that people are liking things and staying with videos, perhaps longer than the average time for videos of a certain length, then they're going to help that come to the surface of the searches when people search in. And they are more likely to put it down the right hand side as a recommended next video. Yeah? So it helps, and it helps all of us. You know, I mean, I will not watch somebody else's video without hitting the like within about the first 5 seconds. That's before I've even started really watching it properly. If I open a video up to watch it, it gets a like straight away, and I've never taken one off yet. I just think that's the thing to do, but not everybody does. And I will see you next time. And what I'm going to film next week, at the moment, I haven't got a clue, so I can't tell. Oh, one thing I will tell you. Let's drag the video on a bit. How long are we up to now? Oh, Christ. Excuse me. It's getting on a bit. We need to stop. The Project Orchids, the last update where I go over all the updates throughout the year, is due in December. That's a couple of days' time. So I've got to get that lot out. And the first Project Orchid final update for the year will be sometime next week. Complicated for me because I've got 4 pictures to talk about showing the progress of the plant, plus the video clip of how it is now, and a quick chat about how well it's done and did it do as well as I thought. Is it still with us, because some of them aren't. So yeah, the project plants are coming out again, and then once we get after Christmas and New Year, we'll choose a new set. And I'm changing the logic this time. I'm going to stick with the Oncidium Alliance as 1, Cattleya Alliance as 2, Dendrobiums as 3, and the 4th one, which used to be the cooler, shadier types, is just going to be others, because it allows me to include some, quite a few, that fall through the gap, because they're not any of those. You know, I can have a one-off warm grower. Well, it's not an Oncidium, it's not a Cattleya, it's not a Dendrobium, and it's not a cooler, shadier type, so it can't be included. So I'm going to have an others instead for next year. And we'll go about choosing those, as I said, once we get into next year. So I've got those to do, you know, so we'll see how it goes. But I'll get the first one done during next week, no doubt. Yeah, we'll go from there. Right, see you next time then. Thanks for dropping by. You can go and have your Sunday lunch now.